Hey, listeners, ready to transform your sleep? Cozy Earth is all about lasting luxury and comfort. Their bamboo sheets have been called the world's softest sheets, cooling, moisture wicking, and unbelievably soft. And I can tell you they get better with every wash. And they have a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty.
But it doesn't stop there. They have bath, sleepwear, loungewears, and even skincare. Free shipping on orders of $50 or more.
Make sure you go to cozyearth.com, use our code INFOGO at checkout to save 21% off. You can find all of this in the show notes. Welcome to the podcast. I'm William.
And I'm Kat,
And that makes this Info on the Go.
feeding your curiosity wherever you go.
And we're going to dive into the gates of hell, the fire that never died. What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
Have you ever heard of this?
Yes.
Okay. So, I'm going to I'll try to set this up. Or do you want to do it?
I mean, I don't care.
All right. Well, you start us off.
Now, picture this. You're in one of the most remote deserts on Earth, the vast expanse of the Karakum Desert in Central Asia. It stretches for hundreds of thousands of square miles. Much of it is flat, dry, and sparsely inhabited. Temperatures here regularly exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer, and entire stretches of land can feel completely lifeless. But in the middle of this emptiness, there is something that shouldn't exist.
A massive circular crater that burns in the ground like an open wound in the Earth's surface. It's roughly 230 feet, or about 70 meters for our friends other than the United States. This is a cross, and it's up to 100 feet deep. Instead of rock or sand at the bottom, there's fire. Dozens of separate burning pockets spread across the crater floor, each one fueled by gas escaping from underground. This is the Darvaza Gas Crater, one of the most unusual man-made geological accidents in modern history.
Now, from a distance, it looks almost unnatural, like a glowing orange eye embedded in the floor of the desert. At night, the fire is visible from far away because there's nothing around it to block the light. No cities, no infrastructure, just darkness and flame. The site became widely known as the Gates of Hell, which is a name that did not come from scientists, but from observers who were struck by its appearance. A seemingly bottomless pit filled with fire, sitting in one of the most isolated landscapes on the planet.
Sounds like we need some marshmallows.
Right.
What makes it even more remarkable is not just about what it looks like, but how long it's been burning. Because this fire has been active for decades. It began in 1971 during a Soviet geological drilling operation. Engineers were exploring the region for natural gas deposits, part of a broader effort across the Soviet Union to map and deploy energy resources in Central Asia. The area beneath the desert, the area beneath the desert was already known to contain large reserves of natural gas trapped underground.
While drilling, the ground suddenly gave way. The rig collapsed into a sinkhole and the equipment was lost. More importantly, the collapse released methane gas into the air, an invisible but highly flammable gas that can accumulate in dangerous concentrations. At the time, scientists feared the gas could spread and create a toxic hazard for nearby settlements and workers. The decision they made was meant to be temporary. Well, they ignited the escaping gas, assuming the fire would burn off the leak within a few days or weeks. That assumption turned out to be completely wrong.
I'm sorry here. But would you like to be the guy that's like, man, I'm gonna strike this match and I'm gonna throw it down in there, y'all better run?
No, I don't think I would want that job, especially knowing that now it's still burning.
Well, I'm just thinking, how, you know what, we're gonna get
How
into
did how did that
it.
decision become like, yeah, that's what we need to do?
But my thing is like, natural, like it's gonna spread. Like it's not just gonna be like, all right, man, I'm gonna go light the grill. It's like you leave the lid on, turn the gas on, and it's like, hey, I'm gonna go light the grill from afar.
Oh, right.
Anyway, sorry. But what was supposed to be a short-term safety measure, well, it became a permanent combustion site. Over time, the crater it stabilized into what is today a continuous burning geological feature, sustained by natural gas reserves still present beneath the desert floor. There is no single flame at the center. Instead, the fire exists in scattered clusters across the crater floor, where gas vents up through the cracks in the rock and ignites on contact with oxygen.
The question becomes unavoidable. Why would a hole in the earth keep burning for more than half a century? Now, that question leads into a story that begins not with fire, but with geology, ambition, and a miscalculation in one of the most remote regions of the former Soviet Union. Title: The Gates of Hell.
So the story really begins in the vast interior of what is now Turkmenistan, within one of the harshest environments in the region, the Karakum Desert. Karakum literally translates to black sand, though in practice it is a landscape of shifting dunes, salt flats, and dry wind that carve terrain that stretches for hundreds of miles without, interruption.
In the mid 20th century, this remote and largely uninhabited region became something very different in the eyes of the Soviet Union. It was not just empty land, it was potential. Beneath the desert floor lay vast reserves of natural gas, part of a broader energy system that Soviet geologists were racing to map, understand, and exploit.
So during the 60s and early 70s, the Soviet Union was in a period of intense industrial expansion. Energy independence was a strategic priority, and natural gas was becoming one of the most important resources in the national economy. Across Central Asia, teams of geologists and engineers were deployed to into this remote territories with a clear mission: locate underground reserves, assess their size, and prepare them for extraction.
This was an era defined by confidence in science and engineering. Soviet geological surveys relied on seismic readings, exploratory drilling, and early mapping techniques that, while advanced for their time, still left large gaps in understanding what lay deep beneath the Earth's surface. The Karakum region was especially promising. Early surveys suggested significant pockets of methane rich gas trapped in porous rock formations. These reservoirs formed over millions of years where organic material decomposed under pressure and heat, creating large underground gas fields sealed beneath impermeable layers of rock and clay.
For engineers and planners, this was exactly the kind of resource that could fuel cities, factories, and entire industrial regions. Drilling operations began across the desert. Heavy rigs were transported into isolated zones where there were no roads, no infrastructure, no nearby settlements. Everything had to be built from scratch. Temporary camps, supply lines, and drilling platforms were assembled in extreme heat and isolation.
The optimism was high. There was a prevailing belief that with enough technical skill and machinery, even the most remote environments could be transformed into productive energy zones. The desert was not seen as a barrier, but as a frontier waiting to be unlocked. But beneath that optimism was uncertainty.
Unlike developed oil and gas fields in more studied regions, the geology of Karakum was not fully understood. Subsurface conditions varied widely. Gas pockets could be large and stable, or unpredictable and fragile. Drilling into these formations carried risks that were not always fully visible from surface surveys. Still, operations they pushed forward.
Engineers drilled deeper into the earth, chasing pasteurized pockets of methane gas believed to be part of a larger underground system. Even successful samples reinforced the belief that the region held even greater reserves waiting to be tapped. Yet, the deeper they went, the less predictable the ground became.
So, what looked like stable terrain on the surface sometimes concealed voids below, so gas pressure could shift unexpectedly. And the desert, which appeared empty and uniform above, was in reality a complex and uneven geological structure shaped over millions of years. At this stage, nothing catastrophic had happened yet. There was no fire, no crater, no global landmarks.
But the conditions were quietly building toward a moment of collapse. one that would transform a routine drilling operation into one of the most unusual environmental accidents of the 20th century. And it would begin, as many industrial disasters do, with a single assumption that the ground beneath them was more stable than it actually was.
In 1971, Soviet geological teams operating in the Karakum Desert were running a routine exploratory drilling operation. The goal was straightforward on paper. Tap into a suspected underground natural gas reservoir, measure its size, and evaluate its potential for extraction.
The site had already been selected based on earlier seismic readings suggesting a significant pocket of methane rich gas trapped beneath layers of porous rock. The drilling rig was positioned, equipment was assembled, and operations began under conditions that were difficult but not unusual for Soviet field teams working in remote Central Asia. At first, everything behaved as expected. The drill advanced into the ground, extracting geological samples and confirming what earlier surveys had suggested. There was no immediate indication that anything was unstable.
But then the ground it gave way. Without warning, the structure beneath the drilling site collapsed. The soil and rock supporting the rig lost integrity, and the entire platform dropped into a rapidly forming void. What had appeared to be a solid desert terrain, in reality, it was just a thin layer covering an empty subsurface pocket. So the drilling rig, along with much of its equipment, was swallowed into, well, this massive sinkhole.
And this collapse was not just a structural failure, it was a geological exposure event. The ground had broken open into a previously sealed underground system, releasing what engineers immediately recognized as a major hazard: methane gas.
So methane is odorless and colorless and highly flammable. In enclosed or concentrated environments, it can also displace oxygen, creating a suffocation risk. In open air desert conditions, the immediate concern was not only ignition, but the possibility of uncontrolled gas dispersal across the wider area.
At the time, the teams on site had limited options. There was no established infrastructure for capturing or sealing a breach of this scale in such a remote location. Transporting heavy containment equipment into the desert would take days or weeks, and the gas was already escaping into the atmosphere.
So the engineers and geologists faced a rapidly escalating situation. An open sinkhole was releasing continuous streams of methane into the air, with no immediate way to stop it. The concern was twofold. First, there was the direct safety risk to workers on site because methane buildup in enclosed pockets or low-lying areas could lead to asphyxiation or explosion hazards if ignited accidentally.
Second, there was the broader environmental and operational risk. If the gas continued to escape unchecked, it could spread beyond the immediate site, potentially creating a toxic and flammable zone across part of the desert. And at this stage, the collapse had not yet become the gates of hell. There was no fire, no glow, no dramatic visual phenomenon. There was only a widening crater, a consistent release of invisible gas, and a growing sense of uncertainty about how to respond.
So the engineering challenge was unprecedented for the team. They had encountered a subsurface gas field that was not only larger than expected, but actively venting into the open environment. And with no clear containment method available at that moment, they made a decision that would permanently change the site. A decision meant to solve a short-term crisis, but one that would define the next half century of the crater's existence.
After the collapse in the Karakum Desert, the Soviet geological team was left with a rapidly worsening situation. A massive sinkhole had opened in the ground, and from it, methane gas was continuously leaking into open air. The immediate challenge was not just structural, it was chemical, environmental, and potentially explosive.
Kat, I say before we get into, the major problems, I say I gotta go grab a Coke.
I'm gonna get a Pepsi.
We'll be right back. So now that we're back, at the time, the engineer
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
ready to turn an ordinary day into an unforgettable adventure, check out QR Hunter. It lets you create custom treasure hunts with reusable QR code tiles. You can personalize clues, puzzles, photo challenges. You can do it all in just a few minutes. It's perfect for birthday parties, family game nights, classrooms, parks, team building events, or if you just want to have family fun. The free QR Hunter app, it works with any smart device. The adventure, it never really ends. You can search for QR Hunter on Amazon, or you can simply click the link in the show notes. But let the adventure start today. On the on site faced a problem that did not have a clear protocol answer. There was no established protocols for sealing a large remote gas breach of this kind, at least in the early 1970s, especially in such an isolated desert environment. Heavy containment systems, if they existed at all, would have taken significant time to transport and assemble.
The gas, however, was already escaping. Faced with limited options and increasing concern about the buildup of flammable methane in the surrounding air, the team arrived at a controversial decision. They would ignite the gas. That was the best they could come up with.
Mm. Well, I mean, think about it. In all honesty, that was probably the best thing that they could do at the time.
I mean, you're not wrong. Okay, I'm not saying it was altogether wrong, right? Because
Well, if they hadn't, we wouldn't be doing this episode.
that's true.
The reasoning was based on a simple assumption. Methane is combustible, and if it burned off in a controlled way, it could be removed from the environment. So in theory, setting the gas alight would convert the invisible spreading hazard into a visible flame that would gradually extinguish once the underground supply was exhausted. So in other words, they're trying to make it visible so that people can stay away from it and not have to worry about asphyxiation because remember, it's colorless and odorless.
Right, right. I mean, you just see birds dropping out of the ground. They're often out. You just see birds dropping out of the sky and stuff.
Yeah.
The expectation was that this would be a temporary solution, possibly lasting only a few days or at least a couple of weeks. Once the gas pocket burned off, the fire would go out and the site could be stabilized or reassessed. This was not an experimental act in their minds. It was a practical response based on known combustion principles and the belief that the gas reservoir feeding the crater was finite and relatively small.
The ignition source was introduced and the methane caught fire. At first, the result appeared consistent with, their expectations. Flames erupted from the crater, consuming the escaping gas and transforming the sinkhole into a burning pit. The immediate hazard of invisible gas accumulation seemed to be eliminated, but it was replaced by a visible and contained fire source, at best. But almost immediately, a critical miscalculation became very clear.
The underground reservoir was not small. It was part of a far larger and more extensive natural gas system than initial surveys had suggested. Instead of diminishing, the flow of methane continued steadily from beneath the surface, feeding the flames without interruption. What was expected to be a short lived burn-off did not slow down. After day, the fire remained active, and week after week, it continued.
So the ignition that was meant to contain the crisis, well, it created something unintended. Rather than eliminating the hazard, the team had converted it into a continuous combustion system, one that the underground geology itself would keep alive.
At that moment, the project shifted from emergency response into something entirely different. What had been a controlled intervention became an ongoing phenomenon, and the expectation that the fire would soon extinguish began to diverge permanently from reality.
Why the fire never went out? To understand why the fire never died out in the Darvaza Gas Crater, you have to look beneath the surface at the Karakum Desert and into the behavior of methane itself.
Methane is a simple hydrocarbon gas, formed deep underground over millions of years. In regions like Central Asia, it accumulates in porous rock formations, essentially natural storage spaces within sandstone and sedimentary layers. These pockets are often sealed by denser rock above them, trapping the gas under pressure. When the 1971 collapse occurred, that seal was broken.
So instead of a single isolated pocket, the drilling site had tapped into a broader system of connected gas reservoirs. So beneath the desert was not one chamber, but a network of methane-rich formations slowly feeding into each other through cracks and permeable layers of rock.
Once ignited, the crater became something unusual in geological terms, a continuous combustion interface between the atmosphere and an active underground gas system. The fire did not rely on a single fuel source that could be exhausted, it being continuously fed. Methane seeped upward through fractures in the ground driven by pressure differences deep within the subsurface, not substance.
Yeah,
Damn.
we're not talking about methamphetamine and substance abuse.
I didn't even go there, but no, you're right. Methane seeped upward through fractures in the ground driven by pressure differences deep within the subsurface geology. As long as that pressure exists and in natural gas fields, it can persist for very long periods. The gas continues to migrate upward.
When it reached the surface, it ignited. This is why the fire did not diminish. It was not burning a finite pile of fuel, it was burning a consistently replenished supply. And over time, the structure of the crater itself stabilized this process. The collapse had created a wide open depression, roughly 230 feet or 70 meters across, and several dozen meters deep. This shape mattered. It exposed a large surface area of fractured ground, increasing the number of points where gas could escape.
Instead of one central flame, the fire distributed itself across the crater floor. Methane vented through hundreds of small fissures and openings, each acting as its own ignition point. The result was not a single fireball, but a field of flames. Clusters of combustion scattered across the base of the crater like glowing patches stitched into the earth.
This fragmentation is part of what made the site so visually striking. The fire was not uniform. It flickered in uneven pattern. It flickered in uneven patterns, consistently shifting as gas flow changed, beneath the surface. Some vents would weaken while others became stronger, really just depending on subsurface pressure and pathways. Geologically, the crater had effectively became a self-sustaining system.
Gas from underground fed combustion at the surface, while the heat and collapse structure helped maintain open pathways for continued release. There was no single point of failure that could shut the system down naturally, so what began as a drilling accident had evolved into a rare intersection of human activity and natural geologic process, a place where industrial intervention and deep earth chemistry were now permanently linked. And as the fire persisted, it stopped being viewed purely as a disaster site. It became something else entirely, a landmark, a curiosity, a phenomenon that seemed to defy the expectation that it would ever simply burn out. That sounds interesting.
As the fire continued burning in the middle of the Karakum Desert, the site gradually shifted from an industrial accident into something with a name, an identity, and eventually a reputation that spread far beyond the region.
Locally, it became known as the Darvaza Gas Crater, named after a nearby village and the broader desert region. Darvaza itself comes from a Persian word meaning gate, a coincidence that would later take on a far more dramatic meaning than anyone originally intended.
But the name that captured global attention was not the technical one. It was the Gates of Hell. The nickname did not come from the official scientific reports or government documents. It emerged from observers who encountered the site and tried to describe what they were seeing. At night, the crater transforms the surrounding desert into something almost surreal. From a distance, there is no infrastructure, no buildings, no light pollution, just darkness across an endless landscape. Then suddenly, a glow appears on the horizon.
As you get closer, that glow resolves into a massive circular opening in the ground, illuminated from within. The fire does not rise like a single column, and instead it spreads across the crater floor in uneven clusters, flickering and shifting as methane continues to seep upward through the fractured earth. The effect is disorienting. In an environment defined by emptiness and silence, the crater introduces movement, heat, and constant combustion. It feels less like a geological feature and more like something artificial or even mythological.
Mythological, you say?
Hmm.
You are a wizard, Harry. This visual impact is really what gave rise to the gates of hell when you imagine it. The idea of a glowing opening in the earth, seamlessly bottomless and perpetually burning, resonated strongly with human instincts about danger, the unknown, and the boundary between surface world and, well, what lies beneath it. For those who visit the site, the emotional reaction was often immediate and complex. There is fascination, but also discomfort. The scale of the fire is large enough to feel overwhelming up close, yet the surrounding desert remains completely silent and empty. That contrast between intense activity and total isolation creates a sense of non-reality. Okay, we got to put this on our calendar
Yes. Map.
map.
Globe.
Well, I mean, we're gonna hit the globe anyway, right? Might as well just,
Yes.
draw a little, what is that called? Another point of interest.
Yes. Yes. Pin it.
Okay, pin it. All right, there you go. Well,
We'll just
sticky
put a
note
pin
that.
in it. Yeah.
Sticky note it. I don't like to put a pin in it. They say that in meetings all the time. Just put a pin in that. No, put a sticky on it. I might accidentally stick myself.
Early visitors included geologists, engineers, and researchers who were initially drawn by professional curiosity. They wanted to understand how the system was sustaining itself, how much gas was feeding it, and whether it posed any wider environmental risk. But over time, the crater attracted a different kind of attention. Photographers began documenting it, travelers began making difficult journeys to reach it, and stories circulated online and travel writing, often emphasizing its almost otherworldly appearance rather than its technical origins.
What started as a Soviet era engineering failure gradually transformed into a global curiosity, an example of how human intervention in natural systems can produce outcomes far beyond the original intent. The crater was no longer just a site of combustion, it had become a symbol of scale, accident, and endurance. And as its fame grew, so has the debate over what it represented and whether something that began as a mistake should remain as it is or be brought to an end.
One of the reasons the Darvaza Gas Crater remains so visually and culturally powerful is its isolation. It sits deep within the Karakum Desert, far from major cities, infrastructure, or established tourist routes. Reaching it requires crossing long stretches of desert road and open terrain where there is very little else to see. No landmarks, no settlements, just distance.
That remoteness has played a major role in shaping its reputation. Because it's difficult to access, the crater was never absorbed into mass tourism in the way many natural landmarks are. Instead, it remains something closer to a destination for those unique people seeking it out: adventurers, geologists, documentary crews, and photographers that were willing to travel far for a single site.
When they arrive, they're confronted with something that is difficult to contextualize in everyday terms. The crater's not just a visual spectacle, it's an active geological event. Methane continues to escape from beneath the surface, feeding combustion that's persisted for decades. The result is a landscape that feels suspended between natural formation and industrial accident.
As more visitors documented the site, stories began to spread internationally. Some descriptions emphasized its scientific origins, while others leaned into its dramatic appearance. And over time, details were sometimes exaggerated or simplified, especially especially in the online circulation. Because the idea of a fire that never goes out became a powerful narrative hook, even though the reality is more complex. The intensity of the fire has, well, it's fluctuated over time, and its future is still uncertain. Still, that symbolism, it stuck.
The crater came to represent a broader tension between human intervention and natural systems. On one hand, it's the result of human error, an unintended consequence of drilling into an unknown subsurface gas field. And on the other, it is sustained by geological processes that existed long before humans arrived and will likely continue long after any intervention stops. This duality is why the crater is often discussed in comparison to other natural burning or gas related phenomena around the world. Places where underground coal seams burn for years or where methane leaks ignite in remote fields share a similar theme. The Earth contains energy systems that do not always align with human control or expectation.
We really need to do one on the coal that's burning underneath the ground of this town in Pennsylvania. I don't think people live there anymore, but we really need to do one on that.
There was a whole dramatic movie about that.
Yeah. In this context, the Darvaza crater becomes more than a singular anomaly. It becomes part of a larger pattern of unintended fire driven landscapes, places where geology, chemistry, and human activity interact in unexpected ways. For visitors, the experience often oscillates between awe and unease. The visual impact is undeniable, but so is the awareness of what it represents, a long running interaction between industrial ambition and natural forces that cannot easily be reversed. And that is where its meaning settles in public imagination. It's not just a landmark, it's a warning, a reminder that some systems, once disrupted, do not simply return to their original state, and that in certain environments, human actions can set processes in motion that can continue far beyond their intended limits. Actually, I need to go get a bottle of water there for real.
I'm drinking some honey lemon water at the moment.
We'll be right back. I might put some honey lemon water, I might put some honey lemon in my water.
It's pretty good.
All right, we'll be right back.
Is it my turn? In recent years, the future of the Darvaza Gas Crater has become less about discovery and more about decision making. The government of Turkmenistan has periodically raised the idea of extinguishing the fire entirely. The reasoning is not aesthetic, it's practical. The one major concern is environmental impact. The crater continuously emits methane, a potent greenhouse gas that contributes to climate change. From a resource perspective, it's also considered wasted energy. Natural gas reserves that could potentially be captured and used for electricity or industry are instead being burned off into the atmosphere.
But the solution is not so straightforward. Over time, the crater has evolved into a complex combustion system tied directly to surface geology. The fire is sustained by methane seeping through underground rock formations across a wide area. This makes it very different from a simple surface fire that can be smothered or contained. Attempts to extinguish it, well, it faces significant engineering challenges.
One idea involves physically sealing up the gas flow, essentially trying to cap the source underground. But the subsurface structure's not a single pipe or chamber, it's a network of porous rock and fractured pathways. Blocking one point does not guarantee the gas will not find another route to surface.
Another approach would involve flooding or covering this crater. But the size and depth, that we talked about, and being so deep, make a large scale containment extremely difficult in a remote desert environment with no infrastructure. There's also the issue of pressure. The same natural forces that allowed methane to accumulate for millions of years are still active. Any intervention would have to account for an ongoing system, not a static one.
Because of this, no method has emerged as a definitive solution. At the same time, there is a competing perspective. Some argue that the crater has become a cultural and scientific landmark. It attracts researchers, photographers, and visitors who view it as a rare visible example of underground gas combustion. In this view, it represents not just an accident, but a unique intersection of geology and human history.
So this creates a tension between two interpretations. One sees it as an environmental problem to be solved, and the other as a phenomenon to be studied and preserved. Neither position is simple. Extinguishing it is not just a matter of applying force or technology. It would require altering a deep and active geological system where full structure is still not completely understood. Leaving it as it is, however, means accepting ongoing emissions and the continuation of a process that began unintentionally more than 50 years ago.
So the crater remains in place, still burning, still changing slowly with time. A site where geology, engineering limits, and human decisions continue to overlap without a clear endpoint. And in that uncertainty, the gates of hell remain exactly what have become over time. Not just a fire in the desert, but an unresolved question written into the landscape itself.
So we return to the same place where this story began, deep within the vast emptiness of the Karakum Desert, where the horizon stretches without interruption and the world feels distant in every direction. And in the center of that silence sits the Darvaza Gas Crater.
It is still burning. The paradox is difficult to ignore. A solution meant to eliminate a problem instead created a landmark. A controlled burn became an uncontrolled permanence, and a remote industrial site became something far larger in meaning than its origin. In the end, the crater's not just about fire, it's about consequence, about the gap between expectation and outcome, and about how some actions, once set in motion, do not conclude on human timelines, because some fires do not simply consume fuel.
Some fires persist long enough to outlast the decision that created them, and in doing so, they did something even more unusual. They burned history itself. I mean, I thought this one was really fun. I thought it was very interesting. I come across this in a National Geographic magazine.
Huh.
Yeah, pretty sure that's where I came up with this idea because this
I
was
mean,
my
it's probably, I mean, it makes sense. It's definitely up there, avenue.
yeah. Had you ever heard of it before this?
I think I've heard mentions of it, and I think I might have like seen some pictures of it here and there, but no, I didn't know this much about it.
Mm. Yeah, we always deep dive into this stuff. But if you would like to support this podcast, tell a friend and help get the word out.
If you'd like to support the show, you can do so at Patreon or take advantage of our sponsors. Those links are in the show notes. Also, right now, our Patreon is opened up to everybody for free. You just have to join Patreon, really.
Yeah, and at no charge.
No charge. It's all free.
Yep. So as always, Kat and I want to say thank you for listening.
Whether you've been with us from day one or just tuning in, thank you.
Yeah, because without you, there would be no show. You can join the Facebook group at Info on the Go. Hey, I'm a poet and didn't know it.
And over there, you can get to know us,
Or ask a question.
but follow us wherever you get your podcast.
And send us some of that fan mail using the link in the show notes or leave a review.
And leaving that review really does help others find us. You can also email us directly at
infoonthegopodcast@gmail.com.
all of that is in the show notes. Till next time.
Stay curious. Hey, listen up. All of my workforce friends out there, whether you're ranchers, farmers, or you just need a pair of good leather gloves, look no further than Bare Knuckles, the best leather gloves ever made, featuring a patent design crafted for natural curve of the fingers. These gloves deliver a perfect fit, superior protection, and all-day comfort. Made from premium leather, right now get an exclusive 15% off, and you can find that at buybareknuckles.com. But make sure you use our code INFOGO at checkout. You can find that link in the show notes. Upgrade your hands, and remember, every purchase, well, it supports the show. So thank you.
If you love unforgettable treats, you've got to try Molly B's gourmet cookies. These aren't your average cookies. Molly B's brings bold, artisan crafted cookies straight to your pantry. We're talking chocolate, cherry, and amaretto and be cordial. Earl Grey, lavender, white chocolate, and lemon glaze in the tea. Even maple, bacon, whiskey, and white chocolate in the Boss Man. Founded by a single mom from Alaska, Molly Bees has become a national sensation. You get 10% off any product using our code INFOGO at mollybees.com. Find the link in the show notes.